How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be continuing my Sharks of Summer series. Sharks of Summer is a series I do around here where once a week during the summer I take a look at a shark movie, and this week we're going to be looking at Great White Waters. This just came out July 4th, 2025 on Tubi and is a movie put out by the Asylum. It was directed by Anthony C. Ferrante, who is best known as the director of the Sharknado franchise, another Asylum movie, and this movie stars Angelica Cole, who we recently saw in the movie Shark Warning, and was also in the movie American Poltergeist: The Curse of Lilith Ratchet. We also have Ashton Leigh in this movie, who we saw recently in both Swamp Sharks and Ozark Sharks. And rounding out the cast is Johnny Ramey. And I have to say, this is a movie that I was hoping would be good. I mean, the director of Sharknado making another shark movie is always something I'm going to pay attention to. Sadly, though, if you look at his other shark movies, he wrote the movie Swim, which was a play on the movie Crawl, but this time about flooding waters, bringing in a shark instead of an alligator, and that was okay. And then he made Blind Waters, about a woman who gets blinded and then has to fight a shark, and that was also okay. I think he wrote and directed Blind Waters. And with this movie, sadly, I think it's his worst one. It's a gangster movie, and the gangsters in this movie aren't really super threatening, and it had the potential to be a cool, like, escape the bad guys hostage movie, but instead, most of this movie is gangsters trying to get boxes out of the water, and needless to say, it gets really boring really quick. I wasn't invested in any of the characters or any of the plot. It was a chore to get through, and I honestly was just waiting for it to be over. This movie runs into the classic serious shark movie problem that I've seen so many low-budget shark movies come across. If you guys know low-budget shark movies, most of them are kind of jokey affairs. And yeah, maybe they are using humor as a bit of a crutch, but they in general say, hey, we're a low-budget shark movie, let's be silly, right? And in turn, they can be kind of fun. But whenever a low-budget shark movie says, hey, we're going to take this seriously, they almost never have a rise in production value. In fact, a lot of times it's kind of silly to see the bad shark movie tropes happening in such a serious movie. So yeah, if they did get better, that would be one thing, but sadly, serious low-budget shark movies are almost always the worst because they don't have that humor and they just wind up being boring. A few pros with this movie. The shots, there are some okay shots, in particular some underwater scuba shots. The Asylum's digital sharks have gotten a fair bit better over the years, and the Asylum is actually trying in this movie. All three of those things I can appreciate, but just because they are trying doesn't mean it pans out to be any good, and sadly this shark movie is just kind of boring and I couldn't get into it. So yeah, not a recommendation from me. But all that being said, what's the movie about? In order to analyze this deeper, I do want to talk about a few scenes. I'll be avoiding the end and I'll try not to do any major spoilers, but I do want to, from here on out, talk a bit about the plot and take a deeper dive. We open up with this woman on her honeymoon, and her new husband just bought them a really nice boat. However, he says the honeymoon has to be called a little bit short because he has to go out on a very important job. Sadly, though, he would not come back from this job. The husband would die, it's 5 years later, and she's going to take the boat out again and do a little bit of a trip in his honor. However, the region she's going to just so happens to be near this drug deal. Some gangster drops some packages out of an airplane, and when a boat comes to collect them, it turns out sharks are in the water, and they gobble up the initial retrieval crew. We get the head gangster, who's viewed by the public as like a pillar of the local community, but of course we know better. His name is actually Reverend, and that's his name, not his title, which is good because again, we don't need another clone of Carrie's mom. But his job this movie is to simply yell at the people who he's sending to go and pick up his crates from the bottom of the ocean, and that really is a big problem because these people didn't mess up the order. They're going out to retrieve this. They're going out to help you. It'd be like getting in a car wreck and then yelling at the tow truck driver. It honestly doesn't make much sense. Yet so much of the movie, these gangsters are like, oh, I'm so scared of the big boss, I hope we're not in trouble, and honestly makes most of the gangsters look kind of whiny and pathetic. And I guess I should mention, we do get gangsters in shark movies sometimes, but with this movie, they don't work, and in general, they don't work in shark movies. They were actually supposed to be in Jaws tied to the mayor, but Spielberg smartly cut out that plot. And I think with gangster movies, which bear in mind I'm not a huge fan of, but the general formula is, hey, I'm some tough guy, I'm going to rise through power, I'm going to make threats, I'm going to make deals, the police are going to be on my trail, and then I'll go out in a blaze of glory. And that's every gangster movie ever, which is part of the reason I don't watch them. But with this movie, you don't really get that. As I said, the gangsters here are so incredibly not scary and not intimidating, but we also don't have time to do that rise to power story, and literally all the gangsters do is just try to get boxes out of the water, which again isn't super scary. They will eventually make contact with the main girl. She just happens to be fishing in the area, and she just happens to have a special shark repeller sonar machine. Of course it's low on battery, so we can't use it very long. Plot reasons, right? But she's going to see that they're struggling and come up and talk to them, and you think, okay, this is going to be like some tense, maybe eventually a hostage situation thing, right? But no, the movie isn't near clever enough to do a Red Eye style thriller or anything. And if we're being completely honest, for large periods of time, the movie seems to forget about its main character, the innocent girl, and instead focus on the gangsters get boxes out of the water story. The movie would have been a lot better if it was trying to avoid the criminals and trying to escape and keeping it tense, but no, we're just gonna forget our main characters in the movie for large portions of time. That's great. And I won't cover too much of the ending. The movie by the end does start to get pretty sloppy, not that it was ever put together that well in the first place. There were just a few moments that started getting harder and harder to buy. And overall, this is a movie I just couldn't get interested in, didn't care about anything, and just kind of wished that we went back to making Sharknado movies. But whatever. Not great, at least they were trying. But again, that doesn't make it good. Can't really recommend this one. Whatever though. Anyway, all that being said, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Sharks of Summer 2025 playlist. If you guys want to see me talk about more movies, you should be able to find them there, including movies with this cast like Shark Warning, Ozark Sharks, and Swamp Sharks. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Playlist here. Have a good day now.